Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Ensminger. I'm a retired Marine Master Sergeant, and I currently live in Elizabethtown, North Carolina. I served in the United States Marine Corps for 24 and a half years, and I lived with my family at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina for 11 of those years. What I didn't know was that while we were living at Camp Lejeune, we were being exposed to every day to trichloroethylene, or TCE, a solvent that causes cancer. That poison was in our drinking water, in the water we use for bathing, the water we use for our laundry, and the water we used for cooking. It was in our ice cubes and in our coffee. All were contaminated. I had 4 daughters, and my daughter Janie got sick when she was just 6. She was diagnosed with leukemia. Janie died when she was 9. That tore a hole in my heart and in our families that can never be fully healed, never. Many other people who lived and worked at Camp Lejeune over those years have gotten sick from the water laced with TCE. Far too many people. Those weren't acts of God. They were the acts of our government. Those deaths and illnesses were caused by the people who polluted the water, the Marines who didn't warn their own military family, and the government authorities whose job it was to keep its citizens safe. They failed. I've worked for the past 23 years to gain some degree of compensation and justice for Janie and the other families who were needlessly harmed at Camp Lejeune. Like others speaking today, I'm sorry we can't all be together in person. I personally am living with the costs of the government's failing to hold polluters and itself accountable. Which brings us to Nancy Beck and her nomination to chair the Consumer Product Safety Commission. As others have said, she has a long record of working to block, weaken, and delay health protections from toxic chemicals. TCE is just one example. Looking back at Beck's record on TCE over the past 3 years should itself be enough evidence that she is unfit to chair an agency that is supposed to protect us. The EPA had studied certain uses of TCE for years and found that it poses an unreasonable risk to consumers and workers. But within weeks of arriving at the agency, Beck shelved a proposed ban on it. Congress recognized the EPA had done enough work to assess these risks and specifically authorized EPA to act quickly to address these uses of TCE. But Beck decided not to. She shelved the proposed bans, ensuring that consumers and workers will continue to be exposed for years to come. That is strike one. Nancy Beck directed her staff at EPA when they evaluate whether TCE poses an unreasonable risk to people to ignore the exposures to TCE from contaminated drinking water, air pollution, contaminated soils. I'm going to say that again. Nancy Beck directed her staff at EPA when they evaluated whether TCE poses an unreasonable risk to people to ignore the exposure to TCE from contaminated drinking water, air pollution, and contaminated soil. So, in deciding how dangerous TCE is and figuring out how to protect people, especially the most vulnerable or heavily exposed, Nancy Beck chose to ignore some of the most important sources of exposure for people all over the country. Sources that made up so many people sick at Camp Lejeune and across the country. You can do a Google search and find stories of people with drinking water contamination by TCE all over this country. In Tucson, Arizona, in Franklin, Indiana, in Dixon, Tennessee, just to name a few. Nancy Beck decided that those people don't matter. They didn't matter to Nancy Beck 3 years ago, and they don't matter to her now. That is strike two. Nancy Beck wasn't done defending this toxic chemical TCE, not even close. She got a job at the White House last year, but she still had time apparently to overrule EPA's own scientists and direct them through unsigned emails to downplay the scientific evidence that their exposure to TCE in the womb can cause birth defects to the heart of a fetus. EPA scientists wanted to protect people from that risk, but Nancy Beck refused. She ordered EPA scientists to use a less protective approach for evaluating the risk of exposure to TCE. That is strike three. Maya Angelou has said, when people show you who they are, believe them. Nancy Beck has shown us exactly who she is over and over again. She is not somebody who is ever going to use her authority or power to protect people from toxic chemicals, from dangerous products, or from careless companies. That is not who Nancy Beck is. In 2017, the Senate did not confirm the chemical industry consultant Michael Duerson because his record of advocating to weaken health standards for toxic chemicals rendered him unfit for the position to lead the EPA's Chemical Safety Office. I was proud of my senators, Richard Burr and Tom Tillis, for publicly voicing their opposition to Michael Duerson's nomination. Nancy Beck is a close colleague of Michael Duerson's. They've even written a paper that concludes health standards for more than a dozen chemicals should be weakened. They're two peas in a pod. My North Carolina senators and all senators should be able to see clearly that Nancy Beck is not only a terrible choice to run the Consumer Product Safety Commission, she is a dangerous one. The Senate has the power to reject nominations that are against the interests of the public they are elected to serve. There is only one right way to vote on Nancy Beck's nomination, and that is a resounding no. Thank you.